So if you want to share national secrets, don't do it around the phone. If you want to mutter epithets, lean closer. Okay, Donna Campbell's the only one that I see good so far.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. I'll get out of the way. Yep. There you go. Thank you.
Those are fast.
I'm impressed. You have the right. You're only allowed to get
Y'all go find this Facebook event. This is the agenda.
Thank you.
What house district you're in? Oh, you're in Chatham. Ah. That's your email address in there? Contact me? Well, they got to go. We have content.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Good.
Good.
I left my tripod at home.
That's kind of
So,
yeah.
everybody say hi to the guy in the room. What's your name?
Austin Osborne.
Austin Osborne.
Yes,
He's the one that
Sergeant
keeps
at
us.
Thank
Yes,
you.
he's the one that keeps us in line or dragged out, whichever the case may be.
I want to be helpful. Thank you.
See, I'm trying my best.
Thank you to everyone that's here today for the Education Committee, Senate Education Committee K through 16. As all of the senators are making their way from the Senate floor from, at this point, the longest day of the session on the floor. It lasted almost an hour and a half. We weren't expecting that, but we have some good things to say, some business to take care of, and we have one or two members coming in, and we will call roll here very shortly. Appreciate your patience.
Am I there? One person goes out, one person goes in.
I'm just coming out to use my phone for a second.
I'm not gonna handle this. You go out now, I know who you are.
Yeah.
They're really cracking down on how many people are in the room today. We have guards at that door. And, oh, I don't see him. Yeah, he's right there. They're counting bodies. Terry, there's always a limit as far as the fire marshal goes. They don't always enforce it, though. Donald Jeff Leach is in the house. This is a Senate hearing.
Gotcha.
Excuse me.
Okay, the Senate Committee on Education K through 16 will come to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Creighton.
Here.
Campbell. Bettencourt.
Present.
Higginbush.
Here. Here.
Oh, Hinojosa.
Here.
King.
Here.
Menendez. Middleton.
Here.
Parker. Paxton. West.
Okay, members, we have a quorum. With that, I'd like to welcome each of you to today's hearing, especially our new members, some of the first hearings, and we are very happy that you're here. So excited about your input and welcoming you as members of the Senate. We have some housekeeping to do before we get into the policy of the day, and so with that, we will first be covering the rules adoption for the committee itself, but we have some opening remarks and some staff introductions as well. As all of you know, education from cradle to career remains one of the most important policy discussions that we have in this Texas legislature.
Cradle to
Grateful to serve
career.
as chairman of this committee, now titled again Education K through 16, for another session. Certainly appreciate the Lieutenant Governor's confidence in me to serve as chair in what we have now as a combined set of K through 12 and higher education and workforce strategies and initiatives all together in one policy effort and one standing committee effort, so that we as a committee will not be working separately in silos, so that we can benefit from your testimony as you've waited a long time today already, and your expertise, your commentary, your individual walk through life and perspective on education, the policies that we should address and pursue. That's very important to us. And so with that being known, this committee is combined for those subjects and that subject matter jurisdiction. The committee is tasked with analyzing primary through post-secondary education systematically. And I think that every member of the committee will bring a unique perspective to that pipeline of reference. I would like to start by introducing my committee staff. Court Mansky is the committee director. Of course, been with my office since 2019. Served as my legislative director last session, and again now is the committee director for the Senate Education Committee K through 16. Abby Johnston is the director of higher education. Abby is coming out of her role as committee clerk, where she served for the past several sessions. Carmen Fish is committee clerk this session. Carmen is a recent graduate of Texas A&M University. That always follows, right? Stephen Santoyo is the K through 12 policy analyst assisting Court Mansky. Stephen is a former educator from North Texas who holds a master's degree in public policy from UT Austin and a master's in education from SMU, where he studied classroom pedagogy and the school finance system in Texas itself. Lily Nikolova is higher education policy analyst assisting Abby. Always need to make very close and careful and precise attention to our last names, right? And you'll find that we do that when you come up as a witness. Very important to us. Lily graduated from Rice, where she majored in mathematical economics and gained experience in pre-K education research. Dylan Miles and is it Destin Biglery? Destin Biglery are both interns in the committee office. Dylan is a junior at Stephen F. Austin University, and Destin is a sophomore at Texas A&M University and a proud member of the Aggie Corps of Cadets. My committee staff is located in the Sam Houston building, room 440, so please contact them if you have perspectives or needs or a follow-up on the committee today and all of the discussion and exchanges that we have as members and for our witnesses. Please rely on our committee staff. They're there for you. At this time, I'd like to invite members of the committee to just maybe introduce a staff person that may be helping them or assisting in the education committee effort, and any remarks that our members would like to offer. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm very thankful to serve alongside of you, Chairman Creighton, as the Vice Chair for newly renamed Senate Education Committee K through 16. You are a proven champion of quality education for children. You've just worked tirelessly over the years to make sure the committee is not only strong and good and committed, but you've really listened to problems and you're a problem solver. Thank you for that. This committee allows me to support a cause that's near and dear to my heart, and that is that students can have quality education in the educational arena that best suits the child. With that, I want to introduce my legislative director, Jim Morales, who's with me today. And we'll change out occasionally if he wants to do something more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Members, any other remarks or comments? Senator Parker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and looking forward to tackling all the education issues this session. So many important things before us, and of course there's nothing more important than investing in our precious children. They are the future of this state, the future of this country, and I look forward to lots of great conversation and thoughtful dialogue. We so appreciate your leadership, Mr. Chairman, and look forward to working with the people of Texas as we advance the education policies that are best for our children. I'll be staffed this session by Brennan Sierra on my team, and look forward to the journey ahead. So thank you for your leadership, Mr. Chairman, and look forward to working together.
Thank you, Senator Parker. Senator Hinojosa.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously this issue impacts me personally. I have 4 beautiful children ages 4 to 17 in public schools, and this is something I'm looking forward to and thankful to be part of this committee to ensure that our voices are heard, and just looking forward to working with you, Chair, and all the committee. I'd like to introduce Alexis Williams. She's a policy expert as an intern here, and Alex Sprague, our general counsel, will be assisting us on this committee.
Great. Thank you, Senator Hinojosa. Senator Hagenbuch.
Thank you, Chair. You got it? There you go. Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to be on this committee. I asked Lieutenant Governor to be on, and I was very pleased to be on. I think there's nothing more important, maybe it goes without saying, to the future of Texas, but I really believe that, so look forward to working with you all. My staffer here with us today is Eric Witt.
That's great. Thank you. Appreciate it, Senator Hagenbuch. Senator Menendez.
Didn't have my light on, but I'll be happy to chime in. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your introduction, your work, your dedication to the state and to these things. Today's going to be a difficult day, as you know, the district that I represent, and so we'll be looking forward to working with you and your team. With staffing me today is Hutch Hutchison, and so I look forward to the debate and listening to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. I guess I have the privilege, the senators to serve on the education committee. This is my 32nd year in education. And so, what my passion is, it's in education. I want us to make certain that we listen to the people in Texas, because America's eyes are on us as we discuss issues concerning vouchers. That's the reality. And so I'm hoping that in the discussion, I know there are 2 Democrats on this committee and the rest Republicans, but we're all senators. I'm hoping that as we discuss this particular issue, we look at it in context. And what do I mean by that? Hopefully that we will look at the history of vouchers in this country, and that we will take into consideration all different perspectives. I recognize that we want to make sure that parents have options as it relates to their children. Needless to say, I want to make sure I have options when my children become good. They get the best quality education possible. But as we look at this issue that the governor has asked us to take a look at, that we look at it and see what's happened in other states, and we learn from those lessons from other states as we inform this legislation. I look forward to participating in a debate, having input into the processes I had during the last legislative session, and giving you a perspective concerning balance between vouchers, charters, public schools. Our public schools must be maintained, because they end up being the default buffaloes, our children. In many smaller communities, they end up being one of the largest employers. And from that standpoint, the question is if for some reason we decide that public schools no longer need to exist, or we decide that taking funds from public schools will not impact the schools or the education for kids, it also look about the impact on the community. So I look forward to working with the chairman on this issue. Staff, I'm able to staff since she was about 2 or 3 years old. On the party back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Central West. Senator Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I also would like to thank the Lieutenant Governor for the opportunity to serve, and look forward to serving under your able leadership, Mr. Chairman, and with each of my colleagues. As a former math teacher, as a former counselor, as a mom, a grandmother, and simply as a citizen of this great state, I believe that our children literally are our future. And I believe also that if we are going to keep our future free, that it is imperative that we provide options to parents so that their children can have the best fit, the best success that they're capable of. I am looking forward to doing just that with this committee and with the rest of the body, and with our partners over in the House. And I'm so thankful to be staffed by Ashley Henderson, my legislative director, and who will be running point on this committee, and Danny Salazar, also in my office. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Paxton. Any other comments? Thank you, members. Senator Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your persistence on this. I know at a number of special sessions, and you put in hundreds, maybe probably thousands of hours of work into this. And it's pretty simple. This is about empowering parents. It's about trusting the moms and dads in each of our communities to decide what's best for their children. And right now, only government gets to decide how the money is spent. We're just saying we want parents to get to decide how the money is spent too, if they so choose. So thank you for leading the charge on that, and helping me in this committee is Ryan Jones on my staff, and I'm looking forward to the hearing today. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Middleton. Senator Betancourt.
Tarrant County.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was thinking that I too, like Senator Honeywood, were assigned to this committee almost 11 years ago by Lieutenant Governor Patrick, and so that puts me approximately 21 years behind Senator West in seniority, which I will not make up in this lifetime, I suspect. The history of this committee has been one of interest in school choice. As far back as 2019, I know Vice Chair Campbell and I passed a tax credit scholarship out. She was my joint author at the time. And while this committee has continued to look at school choice opportunities, we've migrated from tax credit scholarships now to the chairman's educational savings account, which is well established in other states. And I would just submit that as iron sharpens iron, so does the debate over school choice sharpen the entire education committee and the education system, and not just in this committee, but really in the results of our education and the state of Texas. Because really what this is about is millions and millions of school-age children and the possibilities of the future that their education can give them. And I, for one, want to make sure that they get the maximum from their educational opportunity. And so with that, I want to introduce, not that he needs introduction, Bradley Hunt, who used to be the clerk of this committee, who has migrated to the far right stage over here, supporting me, as well as my chief of staff, who, like LaWanda, has been around here since Senator West was 2 years old. But more importantly, I look forward to the excellent debate, which I know we have, because we have debated this bill and passed this bill, if we go back as far as 2019 in various forms, a dozen times. But I think this year, as iron sharpens iron, that this will be a year of action, not just a debate.
Thank you, Senator Betancourt. Senator King?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say it's good to be back, and I just wanted to introduce Madison. Huerta Madison. She worked with us in the House quite a few years ago, and then she went off to go to law school at SMU, which was great, but I didn't really understand why she didn't go to A&M, which was really just down the road a little bit. But that's okay. She went practice for a few years, and we're excited to have her back. She's going to be here to keep me on task. Thank you.
Okay, members, appreciate your comments and your introductions. My team and I, we look forward to working with you and all your staff. We spent some long hours together, and these next 5 months through the regular session, which in 23 we left December 9th, but hoping this time that we're much more efficient in our work effort and what we produce. We're going to accomplish some wonderful things this session. We'll talk about this legislation today, but this legislation is not being considered in a vacuum. So it's important for everybody to know the multiples and multiples of bills that we have to lift up public education with unprecedented funding, support for teachers, not just with unprecedented compensation increases, but safety, respect, and a lot of the things that will give them the protections they need and have sought to keep their heart and mind and their purpose and their focus in the profession, which is why they entered it in the first place, right? So many of the things we'll talk about today, you may find that we're not mentioning other things. That does not mean that we're not addressing it and covering it. And I'll mention a little bit more of that as there's overlap in these subjects today through the discussion of the policy. A few housekeeping items for the members of the public. We'll hold public testimony at the very end of the hearing after our initial witnesses finish their testimony. The public will be given 2 minutes total to provide his or her testimony, and anyone wishing to testify or submit written testimony must register using the kiosk system outside the hearing room, and you will be able to do so until 2:30 today. Anyone interested in submitting written testimony during the hearing should also submit 15 copies to our staff up front with your name on each copy, and your testimony will be distributed to each committee member, their offices, and their staff. And we take those submittals in writing very, very serious. So don't think if you don't testify verbally or you don't have everything you need with you to provide to us that you can't get it to us, because you most definitely can, and we look forward to that. Finally, I'd like to note that there's an overflow room in E1016. So it's perfectly fine to stand in the back, but if you need to sit down for a little bit to rest, you're not going to miss any of the hearing, and you can certainly come in and out as it's possible with the room that is allocated. With that, let's move on to our first order of business, which is adoption of the committee rules. Members, the most significant change to the committee rules, which you all supported these rules last session, the most significant change is that higher education is not designated as a subcommittee. It is one standing committee with these subject matter jurisdictions all combined together. And that will be the change in the rules. Everything else is consistent. You were sent a copy of the proposed committee rules in advance of the hearing. I want to obviously provide opportunity for anyone to ask a question or provide comments. You can also do that with our committee staff. But if there are no questions or comments at this time, then we will make a motion for adoption. Any comments? Senator Betancourt moves adoption of the committee rules. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the rules are adopted. Thank you, members. I'll be passing the gavel to my vice chair, Senator Campbell, while I lay out Senate Bill 2.
The chair recognizes Senator Creighton to lay out SB2.
Thank you, Vice Chair Campbell and members. Today I'm laying out Senate Bill 2, the Texas Education Freedom Act. This legislation, it feels familiar, and it should. The Senate passed this legislation 4 times in 2023, but here we are again, and I appreciate your focus and attention because the students of Texas deserve it. Senate Bill 2 finally brings Texas in line with 32 other states, both with Republican and Democrat governors and Republican and Democrat legislatures in those states, offering expanded education freedom to our students and our families. I often say the future of Texas beyond the dinner table with family and faith and conversation and instruction from parents first. The future of Texas begins beyond that in the classroom. And that remains true. If we're being honest with ourselves as elected officials and our constituents, we know that a one-size-fits-all education does not work for many of our students in Texas. Too many families find themselves trapped by their zip code or have a special need that would otherwise allow them in a different educational setting to thrive and advance. Because at the end of the day, many of our Texas students need options and variations on their learning environment, options that suit their needs the most. And we see that day in and day out now with the current options that are available in Texas. As we all know, that we have, many times it's been said, we have many choices now. Senate Bill 2 will serve more students this time around with more funding than ever, allowing nearly 100,000 students to receive an education savings account that would be larger than any other state's school choice program in the first year of operation. So for instance, we would be 25 and 28 years behind Florida and Arizona, respectively, in their school choice options where they valued their students at the top of the priority list for the available resources that could be given to them, and we haven't. Senate Bill 2 builds upon the last version of this legislation from the 88th Legislature's special sessions that we all supported. Well, many members on this dais supported, some did not, right? Want to be fair about that. As a result, the key provisions that we've worked on, like our anti-fraud provision safeguards, mandatory criminal history checks for any vendors, rigorous reporting requirements, and robust data protections, they're retained or expanded. And we'll explain a little bit more about what that exactly means. Just as prior iterations of this legislation, parents can direct their students' approved funds to pre-approved providers, but never have direct possession of the dollars themselves, and no reimbursements are permitted. That is why You can call it a voucher, and I understand the nomenclature is easy and it rolls off the tongue, but it's not a voucher, it's an education savings account that's not just political terminology designed to sound better or different.
Educational
not a
subsidy account.
The reason why Florida has a voucher and an education savings account, the reason why Florida has both is because they're different. Otherwise, they wouldn't have both, right? So Senate Bill 2 is fully universal. So there's $200 million appropriated in Senate Bill 2 for a fully universal population in and of itself. A fully universal on eligibility population in and of itself. And then beyond that $200 million universal population, which in and of itself would be close to the largest launch in American history for a school choice plan, beyond that, there's another $800 million for special needs and free and reduced lunch eligible certain poverty level threshold kids that need help. And they are the priority set at the top of the weighted funds available within the framework, as it should be. If the number of applicants do not exceed the available revenue, then everyone is approved. Because we have a certain framework and we're expecting a certain amount of demand, but we're not sure about that. We don't know that the number of moms and dads that we expect to need and want these choices on behalf of their students will apply. And we've got a great framework set up through the comptroller with funding to not only promote the program to families so they'll know that it exists, but we've got an incredible framework to support those families once and if they're approved. The approval would be by a lottery pick, because again, we're not the federal government, right? We don't print another $1 trillion every time we have a problem, right? So there will be some today that think the program should be larger. I think we're going to have a witness that says that today that all 6 million students in Texas should receive a $10,000 ESA immediately. That's a $53 billion funding effort for 1 year. And the capacity and the operational logistics to even fathom that would be impossible to carry out. So, but there will be testimony today for such a thing. We work within scarce dollars. And speaking of that, the funds for the education savings account, they don't come from public education. In fact, we have a separate bill with an incredible historic lift for public education that, just like last session, for 90% of the regular session in the Senate, had no connection whatsoever to the school choice effort or the teacher pay effort. Many of you haven't heard that one, I'm assuming. So we're being consistent in keeping those subjects separate, and our efforts to lift up public schools and public school teachers, especially with my teacher bill of rights that last session the House killed, but other states modeled it all across the country, and it was graded as a bipartisan bill by many organizations. But I guess for some reason it wasn't a priority. It will be this time around for us. If applications don't exceed available revenue, all are admitted. If applications are beyond available revenue and beyond 100,000 in number, then we will go immediately to a priority set. And that priority set is weighted for 80% of the funds in the school choice ESA Education Freedom Program to be allocated to special needs, students with disabilities, and a certain threshold within the poverty level itself, so that the most vulnerable Texans will have these opportunities way before anyone else. And with such a gigantic percentage of priority within the whole program, that it will be very clear where the Texas legislature stands on who we're really working the hardest to help here and serve here among the most vulnerable Texans. The students accepted into the ESA program will initially receive a minimum of $2,000. So think of our homeschool eligibility, right? And that would be for a homeschool family capped at that point at this time. We're listening to the homeschool families that will be coming up today, and they will be, as well as statewide organizations, and we will be listening to their preferences about that policy. But that number is 100% higher than the number that was passed in the last iteration of this bill. It was $1,000 at that time, and it was fully supported by the statewide homeschool organization groups, mainly talking about the fact that they don't as much have tuition costs, but they have curriculum and tutoring costs. I talk with my hands, I'm going to hit this mic again. So curriculum and tutoring, sometimes transportation to tutoring, those would be examples of the limits of what that ESA might provide. Beyond that, if families choose to enroll their student in an accredited private school, they would receive $10,000 for the Education Savings Account. And if that student has a disability, that student would receive, and this is coming from a public school, they would receive $11,500 if that child has a disability designation. Parents can spend these funds on an example of a different set of menu items. And again, this money doesn't go to the parents like a voucher. So you can't go to Rooms to Go and buy furniture if you have $1,000 left over, right? This is an education savings account with the strongest anti-fraud provisions in the country. It would, the money would be directed from the framework at the comptroller's office, right? The comptroller is our money man for the state of Texas, not through TEA. And then that money would be directed to the providers that were already approved. And then whether it be a homeschool family choosing their own curriculum and then customizing that curriculum afterward, that'd be fine. Or if it would be a private school effort for a student going from public to private, and if there's a delta or a difference or a gap on the tuition for that private school, it's still a $10,000 number for most of these ESAs. And through private philanthropy or scholarships within that school or the community, they would need to find a way to fill that difference, as is the case today. Parents can spend these funds again on tuition, instructional materials, higher education courses, trade certificates, assessment costs, different therapies, tutoring, and transportation as examples. Just as in SB1 that we passed prior in the special, the participants are required to take a norm reference test annually. Most private schools offer that already. There is no imposition of the STAR test on private schools. There are no strings passed along to homeschool families or private schools through this testing effort. So you look at many private schools offer the Iowa test today. Public schools offer norm reference tests to seniors in high school. They're called the SAT and the ACT. So these norm reference tests are in public and private and in the homeschool world. That's the legislation as it calls out for
They're not mandated
those
in
tests
homeschool or
to
private schools, though.
be administered for those that hold the ESA. Previously, we had a hold harmless provision for small public schools in the bill. We passed that a couple of times. Members weren't really fired up about that provision. The bill still passed with it in it. The public school stakeholders all around the state, including in our public hearings, rejected those provisions and said, among many other things, we don't care about that. And the House, through those signals, rejected that policy several times over. So we pulled that provision out of the bill. There's not another school choice plan in the state, in the country, that offers a hold harmless provision. So in other words, if a child or a student leaves a public school with an ESA to go to the private school, the public school would receive money for that child either way. That provision was rejected last time around by many public school and teacher organizations and stakeholders, so it's gone. Senate Bill 2 removes that provision and keeps the program straightforward and focused on empowering families. It's our first of many bills, again, to unleash this session to bolster the potential of Texas education and to bolster the potential of our students and our schools. And that includes our public schools as well. Many of you watched the Finance Committee meetings yesterday, looking at the commitment of over $96 billion for public education funding, current fund formulas, enrollment growth, and an additional nearly $5 billion for public education as new money. That there are 3, 4, 5 states in America, maybe more, that don't even have a total state budget of the new money that we are allocating towards public schools. Not old money, new money. We did that last session as well, though, and that was also rejected by superintendent organizations, teacher organizations, and many public school stakeholders. That testimony was that it was okay to kill all that new money for teachers and public schools if they had an opportunity to get rid of 40,000 education savings accounts for special needs kids. That's very confusing testimony for us as we listen and we try to work out solutions for the future of the state. And yes, that's true. By investing in our teachers and our parents, we give future generations the greatest chance at keeping this Texas economic engine alive, which after the 08 and 09 subprime crash saved America. This economic engine. But if we don't make changes fast, and it might not be in your school district, and we all love our school districts. I don't hear anyone say anything different. The narratives you get through some of your emails definitely says something different. But we show that through our actions, and the political process is brutal. 31 million Texans, y'all have fortitude, backbone, experience, a never quit attitude, and an absolute strong opinion. I'm proud of you for that. I'm proud of us for that. But in this building, it's tough sometimes to land the plane. And we're determined that our Texas students deserve it this time around. Thank you for your consideration, members. I know that was an extended layout, but I wanted to cover some of the problems that have been buzzing around through narratives that don't have anything to do with the actual policy of the bill. And it's important with our media watching that we have those types of clarifications covered. You know, and I'll finish with this and open up to questions. It's fascinating to me that last year, in 2023, not last year, we had a public hearing on school choice, and we had almost every public school stakeholder in the state of Texas in overflow rooms waiting to testify against. And that's okay. It's everyone's right to testify as they see fit in their heart. In Washington, D.C., you can no longer, as a private citizen, testify on a bill unless you're invited. That is tragic. So we make sure everyone has their say, but we've got to keep decorum and make sure we're respectful and keep your cool if you don't hear what you like, right? Don't even think of us in that situation. Think of everyone else waiting to testify next. We have to give everybody the same amount of time. But with that testimony that we had last session, it was very clear that with all of these different opinions, we have incredible misunderstandings within the bill that I think some of you might have questions about today. So I'm going to open up the commentary among our senators to help exactly with that, to make sure the audience and those watching in the media can cover it. When we had those hearings last in 2023 on the ESA, all those education groups and the media showed up. A few months later, when we had a hearing on public school student outcomes, how are our students doing? What can we do to do better for public school students? Not one. I don't mean to say only 3. Not one. Camera. Not one public school superintendent organization, not one teacher organization showed up at the hearing. Not one. When we have a hearing on student outcomes soon, please come. That's important. Okay, members.
Trust that
Senator
you're gonna
Campbell.
listen anymore.
Thank you, Senator Creighton, for a good layout on SB2. Members, at this time, do you have any questions? Senator Menendez, you recognize.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Creighton, thank you for your layout. On page 2 of your bill, where it says low-income household,
Yes.
I think I have not seen it in any other agency where it's defined as 500% of the federal poverty line. Is that, I was just curious, how did you choose the low-income household
500%.
to be
Oh, sorry.
500% of poverty?
Yeah, last session, we had 2 different metrics in our same iterations that we passed. We had a 350% and we had a 500% in the framework. The 500% is essentially a teacher and a fireman with a few kids in their household, okay? So we have these rigid definitions
government
and
employees.
formulas that, you know, refer to poverty levels and refer to income levels and on, and we really don't have a lot of flexibility outside of those references. So because it's a uniform type of reference, that's the number we ended up at to make sure that if a teacher and a fireman that are working hard every day to just make life make sense, and they have 3 or 4 kids, that they would be eligible within the framework and prioritized first,
So,
along with disability.
so you have, I think, $200 million in the bill set aside for universal for anybody who applies, right?
That's right.
So 200 million, and I think, is the bill saying that the ESA amount currently is gonna be about $10,000, is that correct?
That's right. That's right. And within that 200 million fully universal population, the other 80% of disability and within a certain range of the poverty level, they're also eligible within that same law.
Right. That's where I guess my confusion comes, because that's about 20,000 children, if I do the math correct. So then what I don't understand is if this, the lottery priority is supposed to be for low-income household, and you set it as high as 500%, but there is no other program, like free lunch benefits are at about 130% of poverty. And so I'm just, it almost seems like it doesn't really have a priority because the amount of the 500% of poverty guideline is so high. And I'm just wondering if you might be willing to amend the bill so that it really would be a set aside for people who are really the poorest. Because one of the concerns that I have is the $10,000, I'm not sure that will cover, in many schools it'll cover possibly tuition, but it may not cover uniforms, transportation, lunch, books. In some schools they have to buy books. And so if the parents can have this 10,000, but they can't afford to make up the difference, then are they really eligible? What are they really eligible? It's like almost a bridge that's 3/4 of the way built. It's not like
It's a great point. We have some incredible testimony today that will come forward to talk about the private philanthropy through organizations that already exist in Texas, among others. And they're going to present some staggering numbers that will, in a very positive way, shore some of the gaps and concerns that you might have on, is $10,000 enough for tuition? Last session we were at $8,000, and we have some very good data showing that in the upper 7,000, low 8,000 range, that would cover much of the tuition for many, a large majority of the private schools in Texas. Well, just as we're addressing with public schools, costs go up, right? So we made adjustments there on those numbers, and we added an additional bump for students that have a disability.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that your plan is that we will also be investing in public education
moving forward, my question would be, are we looking to make it the same level of investment? Because if the program that you're proposing today is successful with as many educational opportunities as possible, the fiscal note on the program shows that this would triple in size in 2 sessions by 2029. Unfortunately, public education has not received any significant increase in their funding mechanisms in the last 6 years, aside from the 30-cent raise that we did to the school safety allotment and the $15,000 per campus. So my concern is that we're setting aside $1 billion for this new education savings voucher, but I haven't seen the same level of investment in our public schools, and I just think it concerns me that we're creating a tilting of the playing field in terms of our public schools.
Yeah, we put $39 billion new dollars into public education in the last 10 years, Senator Menendez. I don't know that the trajectory you're talking about, and we have OBB here, they can comment. There's no escalation in the legislation. There's no escalation. So if they're extrapolating, if the Legislative Budget Board, for those watching, they do a lot of number crunching for us up here and give us good advice. But the escalation of the growth of the program and the bill, that is fun to see how they would extrapolate the numbers. But we as a body would have to approve the growth of the program as appropriators and on the Senate floor before those fairy tale projections beyond the $1 billion plan that we're talking about now would be anything but a cartoon.
Thank you for answering my questions. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Senator Menendez. Senator Paxton.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Creighton, for this great bill. I've been looking at it very closely, and I have a lot of folks in my orbit that are very interested in it for a lot of different reasons. Public school, private school, homeschool, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness that's gone into this.
Thank you.
From what we started with, how far has this bill come? From what we started with when we first began considering this legislation?
Well, it depends on what we mean by beginning this path. Senator Betancourt for years carried an incredible tax credit opportunity that many states offer today. Florida, as an example, has a very successful program there. And we've had different iterations of small school choice efforts over the past, I would say, 4 sessions for sure. Maybe since back to 2015, but how far have we come just working through 2022, the long year of 2023, the 24 interim, and where we are today. I think that we've been very diligent on sitting in public school classrooms with teachers all over the state, to talking to the brightest minds that crunch the numbers, to talking to families, moms and dads that are just talking day to day about their specific needs for their kids, and they're seeing what all these other states are doing with all of this success, and they're struggling. And we've got so many incredible workforce projections and education gaps at the same time on the progress that our students are making, or the lack of progress that they're showing, especially through the COVID years. But I think really COVID just shined a bright light on the fact that even up to 2022, less than half of the 8th graders in Texas were performing at grade level in our Texas public schools, and many of them were 2 grades behind. So we've tried to, in tandem, bring incredibly bold public school reforms and support, teacher support, and changes to make their lives better. And on the school choice front, I think we'll have the best plan and the boldest launch in America.
Is the ESA bill tied to, you addressed this a little bit, but I'd just like you to make a really clear statement on this. Is the ESA bill tied to teacher pay raises or funding for public schools?
No, it's not. Again, for 90% of the regular session, the media did not report on this, but for 90% of the regular session, the Senate kept school funding for public schools separate, teacher pay and teacher rights and safety separate, and the education freedom and school choice effort separate. In mid-May, after we had started in January, the House kept signaling to kill those bills separate, so we took the hint. And we took a House Bill 100, that had a broad education caption. That was all that was left. And we poured all the subjects in together and sent it back on that signal, and they killed that bill. So we were working off different signals. We were doing the best that we could, but our priority set was to keep these subjects separate.
Thank you. In the section 29.358, which is the section that describes the requirements for pre-approval for different types of education service providers,
yes,
public schools are also listed as a potential provider. Does that mean that a student would be able to use their ESA to take a class, say, a la carte from a public school?
No, the student, if they were relying on a public school campus, they couldn't be part of what would qualify them for average daily attendance. If that school has a chemistry lab and the school is open with a mindset that all kids should learn and our available assets and resources should be available to them if our current public school kids aren't using them, then those opportunities would very much be available on a public school campus, and that's what that means.
In that same section, charter schools aren't specifically named there, but since charter schools are also public schools, would that also be true for charter school students?
That'd certainly be my intent.
Thank you. I've also heard examples of micro schools, co-ops, learning pods, and other innovative models of families coming together to educate their children. Could a family use their ESA to help pay for this while staying in compliance with the requirements of the bill?
They could, but if the micro school is not yet accredited, they would only be eligible for the first tier of $2,000 that would be available in the ESA. If they're, as a lottery pick submittal, if they were chosen, that's the level that they would come in at, just as picture a homeschool family that gains eligibility through the ESA framework and they're awarded $2,000, they're also not accredited, right? So in that unaccredited category, 2,000 would be the maximum, and it'd be very, very regimented and approved on what that could be spent on. It wouldn't tell them, you know, what curriculum to purchase, but it would make sure that safety is a factor and that legitimate companies are a factor. And, you know, I'm trying to think, for instance, that a tutor would have to pass a criminal background check to be able to participate in the program. Hope that answers your question.
That does. That's good. So a micro school could be kind of it can either be treated as a homeschool or a private school, depending on what the micro school chose to do.
Yes, a micro school or a homeschool pod, any unaccredited related, they've still got to be registered with TEA, and it's still got to be or registered with the framework itself. It depends on what the comptroller rules and how they put that together, but it would not be at the higher category of the dollars in the ESA. It would be at the lower.
And I think maybe sort of associated with that, could you speak to the purpose of section 29.368, which regards program participant, provider, and vendor autonomy? And specifically, what I'm going at is, just to clarify, this bill would not allow for government interference in religious beliefs, would it?
No, we had an email flying around yesterday creating a lot of doubt on that. That provision that's mentioned in that particular part of the bill, it's called a compelling government interest provision. The Supreme Court has held it could only be invoked if a serious question about health and safety was at issue. Again, I mentioned that if it was somehow discovered that a tutor was on a violent sexual predator list and it wasn't caught. Some sort of immediate action that had to be taken. But that provision already exists in our civil practices and remedies code.
We watched compelling
This is just a
government interest
restatement
get
of what is already
screwed
involved.
during COVID.
Well, I appreciate that because I know that religious belief is at the center of why many families choose to homeschool or private school, and it's important to our public school families as well. So I just wanted to get some clarification on that because I'd seen some of the same rhetoric going around.
Thanks for asking on that. The act that it's actually found in the Civil Practices and Remedies Code is also known as the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act. So that's actually where that provision was found before this legislation. We'll have the Catholic Conference of Bishops up and the Texas Private School Association, the Texas Homeschool Association later, and again, neither of them either object to keeping it in the bill or removing it because it already exists in law.
I've got one final question. Since this is a universal ESA, could you speak to the purpose of the language regarding 80% of recipients being former public school students who are either low income or have a disability, specifically on the fact that they were existing public school students, and attached to that, would pre-K students and kindergartners be able to receive an ESA under the lottery in this bill?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked to many members door to door and visiting with you in your districts and just working through this process for years. Obviously, on all of our hearts and minds is the largest number of students in Texas today are in our public school system. Right? I mean, the average of 74 school choice plans in America today across 32 states represents less than 2.7% per program of their public school students that left for an ESA. Our program is 1.7% on a launch. This program is still 10 times what Florida launched with 25 years ago. And I believe it's 100x factor or more on what Arizona began with. But for 20 plus years, those two states respectively, they started out with a focus of public school students needing an option that might involve a private school opportunity.
And how does that affect pre-K or kindergarten students?
Pre-K is included.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your attention to those things, and again, your careful attention in crafting the bill, and look forward to working with you.
Oh, thank you for your excellent question, Senator Paxton.
Thank you, Senator Paxton. Senator Middleton.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Chairman Creighton, thank you for all your hard work on this bill. You mentioned how the bill is universal, which is important, of course, to a lot of our parents and our districts and community. And I was wondering if you could kind of expound a little more on how SB2 is a universal education savings account bill.
Yes, so thank you for that, Senator Middleton. For $200 million in SB2 is committed to a fully universal population based on eligibility. So that would be public school, private school, homeschool, right? And so many states around the country have different versions of school choice. They have tax credits, they have vouchers, they have ESAs, they have other programs. But we specifically are working on an education savings account to be created. And so that fully universal population would be served within those dollars. And again, if that was just in and of itself, the launch, it would be maybe the largest launch in the history of the country for any state on a school choice effort. But we also have $800 other billion to serve the most vulnerable kids.
And it's all families around the world.
Yes.
And on the funding mechanism, it's as you sign up, essentially. I don't recall that we have ever in any program put 100% of the funding as if 100% of all citizens of the state will sign up on day one. I don't think that's ever happened. How we appropriate or administer any state program, right?
Yes, I mean, it's unfortunate that Texas is not leading on school choice, right? We're number 30, we would be number 33, right? We don't want to lead, and I mean, we don't want to follow any other state in the country, but if we are followed, we want
Took
to
them forever
launch
to
the
get
best
constitutional
programs
carry
that we
through.
can available, and this will certainly be it. So you're exactly right.
And it's a big number, it's double last session, and I think this is another important point that we considered is there are a lot of states that have school choice programs, and we can see the exit rates. That's typically 1 or 2% a year, so the number that we've got for this appropriation is about that, right? So
yes, we'll have testimony today where we will have requests to include all 6 million students in Texas immediately for a $10,000 education savings account. That would be a $53 billion number just for this year. Not to mention the impossibility that it would take to even set up an operations framework that would support that. Look, in Texas, to lead on school choice and to have the best program available, we have to launch an initial framework and then show success. And we're going to. And I think the rest of the nation, as it's seen its own success, we will see with this framework that we've at least had the opportunity to take what others have done a pretty good job with, and we've improved upon that. And our kids will benefit from it, and our workforce.
thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Good work.
Thank you, Senator Middleton. Senator Mittencourt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Creighton, first off, you've mentioned repeatedly the 32 states that have already implemented some version of school choice. I'm assuming we'll hear today a substantial number of data points, studies, et cetera, about the success of those. And you used to quote some interesting numbers about how the success percentage of those studies was quite high. True?
That's true.
Right. And because again, what gets measured gets fixed here. We're putting in a specific allotment of money that we believe will handle about 100,000 students. And you make a point about the starting a program even as robustly as this one starts. 100,000 students is an awfully large number, because I believe there's only about 70 some odd thousand current openings in private school, capacity. Is that true?
That's what we'll have testimony on today. I believe you're right.
Right. So when you size a program like this, you want to size it for success, because there's also stratified channels to market. There's private schools. We'll be hearing from parochial schools. We'll be hearing from school choice. There's a whole variety of not just charter schools in the public sense or the public school system itself. And when you look at what's happened in the past, especially the fact that there's been decades of usage of these programs, whether it's an educational savings account or tax credit scholarship, there's been problems with fraud in these other states, has there not?
There's been problems with fraud, and there's been issues with implementation on trying to serve too many students at once without a framework supported by funding. And we're going to be best in class on both of those.
So we've learned from that. You mentioned that some of your bills have already been model ALEC bills, but I want to ask a couple specific questions. You've got provision in here that parents agree to use pre-approved educational service providers and vendors of educational products determined by the comptroller. Now, why is it important for providers or vendors to be pre-approved?
Well, we need to, certainly with the use of tax money, right, we have to make sure that, A, we don't push any strings or undue burdens or requirements on private schools or homeschool families. But at the same time, we need to make sure that tax money is being used for a school that's actually a school. So a private school that's submitted as a choice for the use of the ESA, and the submittal says they're an accredited private school, but they're actually not a school at all, there would need to be some sort of a watch on whether or not that submittal was accurate to protect the tax money. Second to that, for instance, homeschool families can choose their own curriculum and they can customize it like all homeschool families do today. But we need to make sure that if it's Amazon, or if it's Barnes & Noble, or if it's a certain online effort, or an entity that's being ordered through, that they're legitimate and not taking advantage of the family or the taxpayer in an unscrupulous way. There's been some fraud on that in other states.
Right, and sometimes substantial, quite frankly. So it's important that the Texas plan starts off on the right foot on this. There is simply no provision in the bill or any legislative intent or any fact or supposition of fact that this bill would restrict a private school or vendor's curriculum, would it?
No.
And the fact that that we're up front addressing fraud and is really just a recognition of the obvious of what's happened in the other states. So we're attempting to bring best practices to this plan because this is $1 billion, and we do, along with Senator Mendez, we'll have some questions on that fiscal note, because as far as I can tell, $1 billion a year times 2 is $2 billion. And so I'm sure we'll have some questions about the fiscal note as an inflated number. But it's important that a lot of thought has gone into making sure that this, because it's not a voucher, because it's a savings account, that the destination of that money not be end up in fraudulent hands.
Yeah, and some that hold the ESA, they may think it's intrusive, that there's a requirement, for instance, for pre-approval for a tutor to simply not be on a sexual predator watch list. Okay, they may just think that's incredibly irresponsible to make sure that doesn't happen, or that child's protected. We have to have certain parameters in this bill for criminal background checks and pre-approval of vendors and providers that are used. We don't find another program in the country that leaves those behind and just leaves it to the will of outcomes, right? So in those aspects, and with your question, Senator Betancourt, we've been very thorough, but we're not encroaching or passing strings on to homeschool or private school families.
Well, this is part of the questioning, Madam Chairman, I'm going to make with the witnesses later to ask them if these safeguards are enough. And I want to point out that once again, this committee led quite substantially on stopping what was referred to by a senior member of this committee as passing the trash long ago, to stop basically inappropriate student-teacher relationships. And we've built on that every session with databases and involving, at the request of private schools, access to it. So once again, these are all lessons learned that are trying to be rolled into this major piece of legislation at one time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Betancourt. And the work that Chairman Creighton has done on this is very thorough, and he's really checked every box, so we appreciate the thoroughness you've done. Senator Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chairman Creighton, thank you for your leadership and working so hard on this very important piece of legislation. Just a couple of comments, and we've covered some of it, but look, I know that you, like myself, and those of us here on the panel are passionate about the importance of protecting public education in Texas and are proud of our public schools. We've got so many exceptional ones across all 254 counties. And I know that you've spoken today already about the fact that the funding for this ESA program in SB2 is separate from the funding needs of public education. And I know you've also commented about the appropriation process, that we as a body recognize the horrible inflationary effects of the last administration's spending and its impact on everybody, be it school districts, businesses, families, all of that, and that we're addressing those issues obviously here in the course of the session. And so I guess specifically, I think the fact that we have a unique element here with this ESA, where we're addressing this issue pertaining to hold harmless, maybe just elaborate on that for another moment or two, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. So yes, in prior iterations of the bill, specifically with signals from the House's concerns, West Texas concerns about very small school districts that could not scale a particular loss of a student or two.